Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of our series of practice plans for the 8U age group. We will be discussing fundamentals in games here again, which is the theme. We want to keep it fun and we want to play some games, obviously, but also address the fundamentals each week with these young players. But things will evolve kind of after this practice into some more specific themes as opposed to general fundamentals in games. And we will get into having goalies next week as well. You could use goalies this time if you had them, but the recommendation is without, but you might have to find some ways to actually keep them engaged in some of the drills that don't necessarily have goalies as a focal point. But as always, starting with our notes, our equipment needed is listed up top. I just mentioned about the goalies, but we'll also be introducing the dynamic warm-up this week. And kind of two of the things that we're focusing on in today's practice is the loose balls and the catching skills. So those are things that you can click on these links in the emails that you got and look in further depth. And just one note in any of the catching drills that if a player does miss a pass, that they should be given a second attempt at catching a pass from a coach. Otherwise, if they're in the offensive zone, it's also a possibility to just roll them a loose ball, which kind of simulates attacking a rebound. So otherwise, we'll introduce static stretching at the end as well. So that's kind of what's on the agenda here for this week. But as always, we bring them into center to start, begin with our land acknowledgement, rehash on some of the skills learned in the previous week, and have a little discussion on fun and ask them if it's been fun, what was fun and so far, and try to get as much feedback as possible, and just starting with a fun little cheer at the beginning to kind of get us going. But we're going to be starting in this practice with line shuttles. So we'll be working on the scoop and trap and scoop techniques of loose balls within these shuttles. So for about 8 minutes, that's what we'll do. You have the option to draw a diagram for the group to give them a little conception on how things will be organized and how it will look, maybe even a refresher on loose balls and whatnot. But essentially, we're lining up 2 evenly spaced groups across from each other. You could break this off into 2 shuttles, 1 in each end. And essentially, the first player begins with a short run forward, and the person across from them is rolling a ball. And so one of the big things here is that we don't want the person leaving too early. So kind of wait till the ball is rolled and then the other person kind of attacks it. So if you do have coaches, it might be good to just have one at each side of the line and just make sure people are leaving at the appropriate time so as to not screw up the timing. But we can start with a relatively stationary loose ball with players scooping it and then later trapping and scooping it. Or we can, as I said, just kind of gently roll it across to the person across from you. And so if it is a trap and scoop, obviously that's something that would, there are 2 different kinds of loose balls. Like there's a dynamic loose ball that's kind of bouncing around in the open floor, and there's other loose balls that are in people's feet who are digging for a ball, and kind of the best technique is to place the back of the stick on the ball, pull it towards you, and then scoop it. So that's what we would do in the second version. About halfway through the drill is the trap and scoop, and in the beginning we're kind of trying to keep this ball in front of us as we roll it to each other and scoop it on the run. So again, just a basic scoop, basic trap and scoop, lots of reps. Have balls ready for any balls that are missed if you're a coach, and you can just give people new balls to keep things going. We get a bit more dynamic of a loose ball coming up next here. We are essentially starting everybody in the corners opposite each other. We have coaches at center here. And as players approach, we're rolling the ball. In this case, we're bouncing it off the boards, and they're running onto the ball, running to the other end for a shot on the goalie. Maybe not the goalie, sorry, but maybe the goalie. And otherwise, it's a 3x3 net that we're using at this age group. So try to get a good shot around the posts if there is no goalie. That's what we like to recommend. Maybe hitting the post is a nice little thing to try, but you could start with a relatively stationary ball placement and kind of work up to a bouncing ball in this scenario. So kind of you can build up the difficulty that way with the loose balls, and eventually we get to catching here. And so with catching, where as the player is running by, as you can see on the right side of the diagram, basically what we do is we flip the ball straight up into the air on their stick side, and they're running with their stick up over their shoulder, and essentially we want them to catch it up here as they're running. So it's not exactly the same as if they were catching a real pass, but it is a chance to kind of work on the hand-eye coordination and soft hands of catching the ball. So that's that. From there, they should have a pretty good sweat going. You know, you can give them a water break at the end here, but then we're going to get into the dynamic warm up and kind of introduce them to what I call the stationary dynamic stretching routine. And so if you don't know what that is, you can look at the dynamic warm up link in the top, and it'll take you to kind of a fully described version of the stationary dynamic stretching routine. Should take about 5 minutes. And then what we do is we get back to a more game-like catching scenario, a more real catching scenario. So we've kind of warmed them up with everything. But what we do here is we have coaches with balls, players on one side, and essentially they start from a cone, break to the open floor. Coaches essentially giving them a perfect pass, and then the players just catching it, running to the other end for a shot, and kind of lining up again in the other corner. Obviously, with 8-year-olds, we should have a coach like herding the cattle, if you will, in the other end and relining them up after they're done. And it's important too that these players stay on the same side actually when they do this drill. So when they come down, we want them staying in the same corner, and the coaches would be over on this side now too. So you probably have a cone here and a cone here in the other end, and we would just do the same thing going the other way. The reason for that is that we, you know, you'd catch it as a lefty, either with your stick leading you. In the case in the above diagram, it would be trailing behind you, your stick. You'd be on your proper floor side. So 2 different scenarios for catching the ball. The lead pass is easier of a catch, but just lots of reps. Again, if the first player misses this pass, I would recommend having a coach ready to go somewhere in the central area here and kind of flip them another ball, or tell them to stay with the ball that they missed if it is like kind of a ball that's close by, and it's more game like for them to just stay with it. But we can demo kind of why we're doing this, tell them why we're doing this. We always want to be looking up floor if we get a loose ball in the defensive end like this, and we want to kind of push the ball, as we call it, or headman it to the player who's furthest ahead if possible. There is the saying, when in doubt, run it out, and we wouldn't force a pass or make a really long pass per se to somebody ahead, especially if we already had numbers, but that's pretty complicated for them. We just kind of want to just tell them that there's somebody ahead of you, try to move the ball ahead. So that's that for the most part. You can discuss what it means to run in a lane if you can get that far, but you know, with these guys, I think just the concept of pushing the ball is pretty fundamental. Obviously, they're not going to be doing anything too crafty other than shooting on the net here. But when we get to this next drill, we kind of highlight how to finish or score goals in lacrosse. This is this finishing in front drill. So we kind of park them about 45 degrees off the net on each side. You can see there is a goalie in this diagram, but you probably won't have goalies. And if you do have goalies, fine, but maybe start them outside of the net for the first series of reps through. And what we want the players to practice is reaching and shooting it off the far post and in, which is the easiest way to score. You can see we've got them all on their proper floor side. We can reinforce that as well, that you have much more net to play with, and it's easier to score when your stick is in the middle and you have all this room to work with. So if in a scenario like this transition, you were coming in on the net, ideally, you're taking a bit of an angle and coming in, and if you were somebody who was, let's say this was a 2-on-1, you would, if you didn't get the pass, you would want to park yourself right here, 45 degrees off the net, and wait for that pass. If you didn't get it, and if you do, you're in the best place possible to score. And so we're just taking a lot of reps of off the far post and in here. If you do have a goalie, you can chuck the goalie in later, and we can, mix it up a little bit at that point. But, most of the shots should be off the far post and in. But if the goalie's cheating, you can always bring it to the short side or pick another spot. But that's kind of the idea with finishing in front. We want to teach players that. And of course, we finish with some games here, some fun stuff for players, just to leave on a high note. But this is called the catch on the run game, and we go with 2 teams. We have players lined up kind of on each restraining line here, and one at a time, they are basically running across the floor this way, every player, and then the next time through, every player will run across in the opposite direction, which up here, this is a bit harder of a catch versus this lead pass scenario where the coach is essentially in the opposite corner, and you have a little bit more space to play with. But either way, both teams will get the opportunity. And what you do is you have the coach, essentially the player runs across, you can start with a whistle or whatever, and the coach kind of gives them, I would say, an easy pass, a perfect pass, more or less. And it becomes a game. And basically, if one team's player drops the ball and the other team catches it, then that team is scored with a point, and you could play the game. I'm suggesting here up to 7. So it's not necessarily, if both players catch it, then it's just kind of a push. But if one team catches and the other doesn't, that team gets a point. And so you could, depending on how long this game goes, you can play possibly a best of 3 series. You've got approximately 10 minutes here. With a 1-minute water break at the end. So a good way to kind of still keep them running, keep them engaged, fun little culminating game here for them to practice their catching on the run. And then lastly, we have the kind of the long shot game. And so 2 teams on opposite sides, and you have basically 1 player stepping at a time from each end. You can see I've pushed the nets a little bit forward here as they're younger. And essentially, players must not step outside of the crease at any time. But what we're doing is basically taking a shot on the net across from us. And yeah, so if we're playing the game up to 7 and one team scores, and great. The players, after they shoot, and we basically want them to shoot at the same time, they kind of have to get out of the way of the ball as well. If you find that that's not working for you, you can have one team shoot and then the other, that's okay too. But it kind of adds another little fun element as well. So that's pretty much it. Huddle up at center floor at the end, come up with an appropriate cheer. And, I've got them working on static stretching in the dressing room at this point with the leg routine. If you do have time, if you want to cut these drills a little bit short, if they're getting bored with them or something along those lines, we always have to be flexible with these age groups, but we can, possibly just circle up and do the stretches at center. So that's it for 8U for week 3. We'll be back with week 4 next week, and we'll be getting more into shooting and starting with the ball in their stick, which is another way to create lots of success and fun early for them. So thanks for tuning in.